Mr. Venom, and we have Hush, and then I'm Mako McGill. Tonight we're going to be talking about open source intelligence and crypto. So we're planning on going for about 45 minutes today. 8:45 should be about the cutoff time, Eastern time. However, we'll try to allow as much time for question and answer as we can. And if it goes a little long, well, that happens sometimes. But we're really trying to hit that mark. So let's see. We don't have currently poll up, but maybe we'll come across one here shortly and figure out what we can do. We also have Crypto Kate. She really wants to be here, and she's trying. So hopefully she'll be able to join us for this very special crypto episode. It'd be kind of weird to have her not here, but great. So I guess we'll just kind of jump in here. Hush, we'll start with you. What is your experience with crypto and open source intelligence?
No speaking to English. Oh, okay. Well, basically, this is one of my favorite categories, but it can get really complicated with the OSINT. You literally have to have your Google foo on par for this category. The crypto, Google will help you out, but not so much as the OSINT. Basically, if a question is thrown at you in this category, you just Google your butt off and you'll find the answer. Like everything that you can think of, you can find. And it's all about your research skills.
Yeah, I would definitely second that. It's pretty much about Google foo, I guess, right?
Yep.
That's where a lot of your answers are going to live. But I think that there were some certain, there were a couple different tools that were mentioned other than Google that were put in there by our other player ambassador, Paul. I'm not sure if anyone got a chance to look at that blog that's at cryptocate.com. But there's a really great, blog out there about open source intelligence and about, and then I just recently released one which was called Crypto or Cthulhu. So make sure you check those out. But there's basically they mentioned 3 different types of formats that were on the blog, which is like trivia like questions, very specific questions about a specific entity, and then sometimes you get a file. Let's go over to Mr. Spidham and see if she has anything to kind of add as far as like the different challenges that you've seen in the National Cyber League before.
Sure. So I love the...
I'm sorry, hold on.
That's Crypto Kate.
It is. Go ahead. I'll just mute.
So I love how when we have the different NCL challenges, there's a very wide breadth of what you need to use and what you need to find in OSINT challenges. One of the greatest things is, as Hush mentioned, Google foo. Always love and use your Google foo. If you've never heard of Google Dorks, they're your friend. I'll post a link momentarily to just a large list of Google Dorks. I believe that Paul also posted one on his blog and blog post, and those are absolutely great for just starting out. I'm trying to think of what else.
Shodan. There are some really awesome tools. I've heard people using Elasticsearch. I've heard people using Shodan Maltego, which comes with Kali Linux. There are just an ungodly amount of tools. There's a section that I believe happened, one of the first CTFs that I competed in for NCL. One of my very first seasons, there was an image, and it was about geolocation, which I absolutely love that part. And one of the best tools that I've found for those type of challenges has been if you've heard of geocaching, they make available the tools to find the geocaches that will allow you to map the IP address to location. And those things are amazing too. And you wouldn't think to look at those, but you can take an image and plug the coordinates from the image into the geolocation maps, and it will tell you exactly where it's at. So
really great
not,
example.
not exactly a geocache, but
yeah, but really good example
very
of using
effective.
the web as far as like, there's so many resources out there. We actually have Kate on my speakerphone here. So Kate, say hi.
Hi, fam. Can you hear me?
We're all good.
We're all nodding, so yeah, I guess so.
Woohoo! Hi. So I'm in a car traveling from the area of Cyber Skyline back to New York. I just signed the lease near them, and I'm very excited. But unfortunately, it means traffic kept me in my car. But we can't have the crypto show without me. That would be a sin against humanity. So I'm here, kind of. I can't see you guys or hear you guys, but John can yell my name and tell me to answer stuff, and you'll hear me.
That's great. Yeah, so thanks for joining us. Like you said, it wouldn't be a crypto show without Crypto Kate. So, and also, I personally love crypto. The crypto categories. They're like puzzles. I'm a puzzle solver, by nature. So I absolutely love working in these categories. These are some of the more challenging, but also some of the more fun categories that we've seen. Now, there was a couple things that were in the blog that Paul mentioned, specifically about ethics. And I wanted to give Kate a couple of seconds to kind of talk about ethics and what the tools do and what how ethics comes into play with that. Kate, did you hear that question?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Ethics. This is super important. This is actually the reason that I'm pretty skeptical about writing too many open source intelligence blogs, because open source intelligence, the same skills that make you good at that can make you really good at stalking. And I'm always very concerned about people's safety. Everything from my player ambassadors to my players to just society in general. I think it's really, really important to have a good code of ethics if you're going into this field in general, because you don't want to see the guy who buys my address off of the internet and then asks if off the street. No.
Yeah. So, it's always kind of a touchy thing, the open source intelligence, is just an example of some of the first ethics I think that you get brought into it as a cybersecurity, professional. And as you learn more, obviously, as you learn, to do attribution and threat hunting, and eventually you learn to do web penetration testing, there are those temptations along the way to use your knowledge to, sometimes just circumvent something that's difficult, or, sometimes go around a system that's in place that's blocking you from where you want to get to. But, I think that's really the kind of, the very definition of ethics is that we are entrusted with a lot of knowledge, and, there's a lot of bad things that you can do with it, or a lot of good things that you can do with it. So, we definitely want to call attention, to the ethics portion of that. And I'm glad that Paul brought that up in his blog. So, all right, so let's see. That kind of covers open source intelligence a little bit. Now, we did actually have one of our one other suggestion to bring up, which is Google reverse image. Have either of you ever had any need for reverse image when you're doing these games?
Yes, very much so.
I don't know if I'd call it need. I did it out of being nosy just to see if I could do it. During the challenges, I was like, okay, so you say we can do this? Let's try it and see what happens.
Yeah. For me, it was actually in a game design. I got some images from a person and they wanted to use them in the games. And when I opened up the images and looked at the metadata, it told me everything. It told me the kind of camera she had. It told me the location she shot the photo in. And I mean, that's just responsible use. We have to be very careful about what we do. So the very first thing that we typically do is just strip all of that data out, right? So, but it is important to understand what metadata is, and I think that's a big part of open source intelligence is metadata. Are there any tools that either of you use for looking up metadata?
I personally enjoy using Jeffrey's Ctf tool. I will post a link in the chat momentarily.
That's the one that I use too the most, honestly. And what I think that's most important about this specific topic is you have all the people that will post pictures to their Facebooks and Twitters and not thinking about how much data an image actually tells if you know what to look for. And it would take like one wrong person with ill intentions to dig into that image and tell you exactly where you live, or tell them exactly where you live, like the whole stalker issue that Kate was referring to. I don't think people realize how much information they actually do freely give when they're putting things online.
Yeah, really good point. Now, I did want to go over a couple things real quick because I saw that someone posted a question over here in the chat, which is great. We absolutely love questions, but there is actually an Ask a Question button at the bottom. And if you could use that or not, I mean, I'll mark it as a question if you don't. But if you use that, then it gives us the ability to mark that so that you can put a bookmark on this video after we finish the crowdcast. It's all going to be archived and available to view offline, but we can put bookmarks in for each one of those questions, and that lets us kind of link back to them and answer those questions more directly in the future. So, if you remember to use the Ask a Question, great. If not, if I see a question over in the chat, I'll pull it over. But one of our questions is, actually comes from Eric. He was asking if we could define what metadata actually is a little bit better.
If you want me to take that, I can.
Actually, we'll go ahead and
I can't hear the definition, but metadata is just data about data. I actually learned about metadata because I know what meta theater is. Because if you do theater about theater, then it's like a meme. It's like, whoa, meta. So meta theater is theater about theater. Metadata is data about data.
Yeah, that's about the best definition you could give, I think. So where does data live, or metadata rather? I've seen it everywhere. I've seen it actually in like the signature files. I've seen it in the image data. Obviously, we're talking about an image. I've seen it before accidentally, just in like a Word document where it actually tracks changes and tracks who created the document, and it actually puts a signature stamp on that. You can tell a ton of information just from the data that is collected about authorship or about revisions or any kind of change control. One of the things I really like in this is in GitHub, right? When we push a new Git out, and some of you may not have ever used Git before, but it's a code revision system. And when you push out this code control, it tracks all of those changes, and you can go through and look at the history of every single change that's been pushed. So there's been some challenges in the past where you have to go through that history in Git and find out an older version of the file that had the information that you're looking for. So the metadata. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I wanted to add one more thing. It's so hard to tell when people are talking. The metadata is usually not written by a person. Like in Word, you can control the properties of a document, but metadata is usually actually written by the computer or computing device. So your camera automatically writes metadata. Your computer automatically writes metadata to the back of files. It's the data that you can't see unless you look for it, and it's usually automatically generated by your device.
Yeah, that's great. So does that? I hopefully that answers Eric's question about metadata. And we actually have Warmind kind of chiming in on that too, which is the data of the picture or the file on the back end, which is exactly what Kate was saying. Is it's not necessarily stuff that you normally see unless you know where to look. And then Warmind also mentions a tool called Autopsy. Autopsy is great for forensics, and it definitely lets you know. Like recovered files, you can go through and pull stuff out of that should be deleted, but it's not. I've used Autopsy before, and man, it pulls so many artifacts out of the memory and all the different scattered locations on the hard drive. And Autopsy is a great tool for digital forensics, but also to look at that metadata. And then we actually have one of our game designers and our Cyber Skyline people, Toby, and he says, for example, when you forget the zip saves your username into the zip as well and distribute it to 5,000 NCL players. I'm assuming that was kind of from a personal example. So yeah, we love to see, just the things that get missed every now and then like that. Sometimes it's in the product registration. So when you register a product in your name, it puts it like a digital watermark, for example, on your file, so that anybody that comes along, they can look at it later. So, and Toby says his username is root.
Before you move on, I just realized, since I'm not actually logged in, you have room for one more ambassador. It could always be Toby if Toby wanted to join.
That's a really great point, Toby. If you want me to pull in, just let me know, and I'll go ahead and pull you in to talk about this a little bit further. We give him a couple seconds, and if we don't hear, we'll keep on going.
Toby will never volunteer to be on the
Oh.
show, I can almost guarantee. But if there are other ambassadors in the audience, feel free to pull them in. That being said, I feel like I haven't heard that much from Hashi and Mr. Senos. Do we have questions for them from the audience?
Yeah, that's another great point. When you ask the question using the Ask a Question button, you can actually tag certain ambassadors that you would like to answer your question. So if you have specific examples of that, if you have a specific blog that you've liked in the past, or a question you think that one of us was, better qualified to ask, then you can direct it directly at one of our ambassadors. we're not going to take offense. So, I have another question, though. It comes from Groot. It says, so I heard a statement of the 6 things that make a good OSINT researcher that will be gone over in this season. Let's see. Is that a future blog, or does anyone have information on the 6 things?
I don't have anything on the content calendar about that, so I don't know about it. Is someone else going rogue?
That's why I'm asking, because I don't know anything about the 6 things that make a good OSINT researcher, but possibly Hush, is that you?
No, that's not me.
Not me either.
Okay, so we're
But
going
I
to...
mean,
Somebody lied and
from
put
a
out
logical-
Jerry. It was probably Toby.
see, which is more reason that Toby should be joining us.
Okay, so if that question does come back up, if we have any additional information, we'll be happy to address it. So we're going to move on from what metadata is. Hopefully that's answered all of the questions on that. And then we'll go on to talking about, well, let's see. I think one of you mentioned Shodan. Was that, I was talking to Kate at the time. Who was that mentioned Shodan?
It was me.
Oh, okay. Could you go into a little bit more detail about what Shodan is?
No, because I don't use it. I said,
okay.
I stick with Google and the things I know, the finding the information from the Jeffrey tool, the EXIF tool by Jeffrey, that one. And I stick with Google, a lot of Google. But
So
Shodan is one that I want to look into because I've seen other people at the school that I attend use it, and they've had good results.
So actually, I want to go ahead and tag in Mr. Svenham then. What do you got on Shodan?
So I actually use Shodan a lot on a day-to-day basis. I spend part of my job and free time where I should be doing something better playing around on Shodan and actually trying to find interesting IP addresses. For all you wonderful students out there, you're able to register for a Shodan account for free and get the premium features that you would normally have to pay. I believe it's $40 per year for, absolutely free. It's a wonderful tool. If you put in an IP address, it will give you back the open ports found on a server. Shodan works similar to your average gray noise scanner. It's always online. It's always scanning, trying to find new open ports. If it's something insecure, it's scanning for default passwords. So you're able to see what is running on an IP address without using something like what runs or built with, and you're able to see it live, and it usually updates once every 24 hours or so.
Okay. So let's see here. I feel like we ought to give Kate a little bit chance to speak a little, but unfortunately, she's in a weird position. She's actually not on our crowdcast, so she can only hear me. So I have to give her a prompt. So we've been talking a little bit about Shodan, and basically, it's a scary tool, right? I mean, you can grab all kinds of information on yourself. I've looked at. I had a honey net that I set up for one of my classes, and in that honey net, I actually exposed it to the raw internet for 6 hours and started collecting data on who was pinging me. And I had Shodan come in twice within a 6-hour period. So that tells you how pervasive that Shodan scan is. And there's some scary stuff about Shodan too, right? As far as like web cameras could be exposed in the clear. So definitely this is one of those tools that we want to practice our ethics on, right? There's a lot of data you can pull. And there's one more part of open source intelligence that I'd like to mention, which is DNS. Kate, what do you think we can pull out of DNS?
The domain name service?
Yes, that one.
I mean, you can find out a lot of stuff about register the website and who owns it and where they exist, or at least what they filled out their information to be. Right? Is that the same thing?
Yeah, that's the same thing. Yeah. So there's a little bit more. I'm not sure. Let's go ahead and tag in Mr. Venom on that one. I know you've worked a little bit with DNS and maybe DNS dig or doing zone transfers or some of the more accelerated topics.
So there's this wonderful tool out there that exists that will let you pull in any DNS record associated with either a particular IP address or DNS name, such as google.com. And that tool is called Dns Dumpster. So you're able to pull in all records, all mail records, also known as MX records, the history of IP addresses associated, where those IP addresses are found in terms of hosting location. You can also search for any text records associated with the domain, the A records for all active hosts, and an overall domain map to see what is a subdomain of what. It's a wonderful free tool that is still in development and does break occasionally, but rather than doing things manually, searching for either a dig or just querying everything about a particular domain name, you can always use that link I just posted.
Great, thank you. Now, I did want to mention, actually, there's actually CTF challenges out there where competitions that completely revolve around open source intelligence. One of them was really cool. One of the past presidents of my club was involved in, where they're actually doing cold case files and looking for missing people. Really cool stuff as far you'll get a taste of open source intelligence in the National Cyber League, which is what I love, of course, is that you get this little taste of everything. But if that is your thing, if that's what you really like to do, I mean, there's some really, really cool stuff you can do with open source intelligence and still on the ethical side, right? Okay, so moving on to, let's see, the crypto side. And I know that Kate's probably going to want to lead here. Kate, I've never touched crypto before. Where do I start?
You start with my book. And that's not me being vain. It is my favorite thing to point people to because it's an introduction to everything you need to know about NCL or about crypto for NCL. But if you're interested in cryptography and you want to go beyond the bare basics, I cannot recommend it enough. Simon Singh's The Code Book. This is a book that made me fall in love with cryptography. Don't get me wrong, I already liked it. I did a lot as a kid. I played a lot of Nancy Drew video games, and I read a lot of the Nancy Drew books, and that's what got me started. But once I realized I was interested in cryptography, I started using Simon Singh's website, which is the Black Paper, and then I finally got the code book, and it felt like it was written by an old friend, and I felt like I finally came home. To me, there's no better book out there to absorb you into the cryptography world than Simon Singh's code book. We do have a blog on it by me. I think we have a blog on it by John, right? You wrote this here?
Yeah, it was called Crypto or Cthulhu. I'm a little bit of a horror genre, fanatic, and one of my favorite writers, is H.P. Lovecraft, and he wrote this entire series about these ancient beings, that control the universe, and they're spooky, and it's just a great horror genre. But when I first started looking at some of the cryptology challenges, it looked like it was written in an ancient language, and so I just kind of drew the parallel between the two and had a little bit of fun with it on the blog. But yeah, so
as far as tools for getting started, on my blog it says this, but if you're just getting started and you're trying to crack the code, if it's in the MCL games, I cannot recommend any resource more than Rumpain, RUMAIN. Somebody please post the link. It is the easiest tool to use for people new to cryptography trying to crack the NCL challenges, and most of the cryptography challenges in the NCL games can be solved using that website, which means Hans and Toby are listening and might stop using those as encryption methods.
But I mean, classic cryptology is classic cryptology. I mean, there's always going to be a Caesar cipher or a ROT13 out there, something, in the classic sphere. And then, of course, we'll have some of the more modern stuff, RSA keys, really, really cool stuff like that, too. All right, I want to move on to another question that it was asked by Jose, it looks like. Any specific legality issues on, I guess, probably using Shodan, or just in general on OSINT? Where is that line? When does it actually become, no longer, in play? When is it foul? When does it become illegal? I'll just open it up to the floor. We'll have anybody else on that wants to.
When you use it, if you use it, and if you're researching someone that basically when you research someone to get more information about them, that you're invading their privacy. Yes, it's public data. Yes, you can get it using this tool. But a big thing, the biggest concept in cybersecurity for 2020 is privacy. It is the biggest movement this year, especially in the client sector, which is where I work. Privacy is so important, and tools like that don't respect privacy. So unless you're authorized to use it on a target, then you're using it maliciously against that target. You can authorize yourself to use it against yourself, but you should really be cautious about digging into someone that you haven't been authorized to do reconnaissance on.
That's a really great point. You mentioned two key terms there that I want to call out again: authorization and use, right? Those are both very, very big parts of this. Yes, this is open source. Yes, it is publicly available. You can get a lot of address data. You can get a lot of court records. You can get a lot of information, just that's publicly available. Pardon me. However, when it crosses that line, I think is how you use it. And like Kate definitely mentioned, authorization, and that authorization, usually starts with the individual. If they have not given you consent to, start collecting intelligence on them, tread very, very lightly. I don't think necessarily looking an old friend up on Facebook or something is a bad thing because you know that person. But when you're actually trying to find information on an individual and you have not got, their consent to do so, I think it definitely crosses some privacy lines.
It's 2020. We all know that consent is sexy.
That's a really great point. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to how to access open source intelligence. A question comes in from Doug Witten. So, I mean, yeah, how to access it. It's kind of difficult to answer that question because I think it comes from a lot of different places. But generally speaking, I would start with what kind of file it is. If it's a picture, you can look in in a picture viewer, you'll be able to look at the data, that is in, if you just right click on a JPEG and hit properties, in the actually operating system, you can see some of that information right there. If it's a PDF, look in all of the different headers that are in the PDF and see what's got embedded there. Just in general, open source intelligence, I think we mentioned earlier before, but it kind of bears repeating, is it's not necessarily something that a person puts into the folder or the file as much as it is the program collects that data and automatically generates it. So that question really kind of could be more specifically tailored according to what kind of file we're looking into. Okay, so I'm out of questions. If you guys want to send a few more our way, that'd be great. But I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about let's go with what's your favorite crypto challenge that you've ever solved? And we'll start with Hush.
Well, it's because I'm first on the screen,
Yes.
isn't it? Well, I think that my favorite one in the OSNT category has been the picture that kind of threw a lot of people off last year or last season with the field in Pennsylvania that ended up that's the one that I had to use the geo mapping tool for. It came out behind a farm and you had to where was this picture taken? So if you went to it, it showed like the general area, but a lot of people were guessing the city wrong because it was owned by it became complicated and you had to not only figure out where the picture was, the actual physical location, but the owner of it. So to do that, I ended up having to not only do the reverse image look. I started using Google, got the metadata out of it, plugged in the location in the geo mapping tools, and then did a record search for land records in that area to figure out who owned the field.
Yeah, that was a really interesting challenge. I definitely enjoyed that one. Mr. Svidum, any favorites in crypto?
Yeah, so I think it was fall of 2018. There was a Pigpen cipher. I was not aware of the existence of Pigpen ciphers at this point. I was very confused. I actually ended up using a blend of OSINT and crypto tools to get that solved. One thing that I love to do if I don't recognize something that NCL has put forward, as we were saying earlier, Google's reverse image search will save your life. And you can put in an image of the cipher. It will bring up something similar, and every once in a while you may find a file name. It's like, oh, Pigpen cipher. Okay, that gives you your starting point, and then you can look for tools. The tool that Kate mentioned earlier, Rumkin, I don't believe specifically deals with Pigpen cipher, but that is a great one that you can always solve by hand. It's drawing. It's so much fun, and I love to write things in Pigpen ciphers now and leave them around and confuse myself down the line because I've forgotten how to solve them.
Okay, great. So let's see. I'm trying to find. There was a question that was asked here. I think Eric, it might have been you that asked that. I lost it. If you could re-ask that question again and mark it as a question, that'd be great. I'm trying to. Oh, here we go. How do you do a reverse image search? There we go. So let me go ahead and tag that as a question here. And then we'll ask that, Mr. Spinham, how do you do a reverse image search?
So step one is to go party in your browser and head over to images.google.com. Once you're there, they have this wonderful little camera button that says search by image. You can either send them the link to an image or upload from your own computer from there. It does take a little bit longer than your average Google search. It takes about 20 seconds as opposed to your instantaneous if you've got fiber internet. And so long as there is something else that is visually similar to it for Google's algorithm, you will get results.
Great, perfect. Thank you very much for the questions and thanks for the answers. Kate, we're going to move on to you. What was your favorite crypto or open source intelligence challenge of the NCL games?
That's a really good question. I think for me, my favorite crypto challenge actually wasn't in the NCL game. I pretty much remember the first time I figured out Morse code as a little kid, and it made me really excited. And I remember the first time I discovered the reverse alphabet. It had the shortest C of anything that I could find as a child. So once I got to M, I just jumped down a line and wrote right to left till I got to B. And I could write secret notes to my friends and no one could read them. So my favorite crypto memories are from 6 years old. But my favorite open source intelligence question, there was recently one where there was a picture of an unnamed individual holding a flag in a field, and you had to find out where that flag was being held. It was a literal flag, and I thought that was really clever on behalf of the game maker. The situation that happened in the room with me and Gina during that challenge was Gina recognized the individual, and it cracked me the F up because as soon as she said it, I recognized them too, and it was, I don't know, it's just a lot of fun when you see people that you know in the game. That's why we tried to do like the crypto challenges not the crypto, the Twitter challenges last season. We try to put as much of ourselves into the game for you so that you really feel like you can connect with people, and I feel like a lot of the open source stuff where we try to put ourselves in, well, the challenges where we try to put ourselves into the game usually ends up in open source because it's stuff you can go out there and find out. And really, that's just our way of connecting with you guys. I know at the Lisa CTF, I have collected pet pictures from our players. That's still open on my Twitter, so if you submit your pet pictures on my Twitter, they will appear in the games that we took. If we get enough, maybe the Cyber Skyline guys will reuse it in the regular season and share your pets some more. So for me, like, the best challenges are always the ones where you get to see a little piece of the player ambassadors or a piece of the game makers or just any part that really brings you into the SPL community.
Great, thank you. And then I guess I'll have to answer my own question here. The best cipher that I ever saw and use was actually a practical use. At the end of our cyber club, they gave out thank you certificates to people for different things that they had done, or recognition type certificates. In that certificate, they encoded a Baconian cipher. So basically, what that is you will change the fonts. So you'll be typing in one font, then you change to another font, and you use like one letter, and then you'll switch over to another font, back to the regular font. So you're like constantly alternating between these two different fonts, and they could be very, very subtle. Like it was just printed out on the certificate, but when you're able to actually break that down in a real sense, I thought that was really cool for them to do on our certificates, and a really good application of like real world kind of cryptography that I'd seen used. Okay, so we have another question coming in, and it is from last season. The last two crypto problems regarding movies, I think. What was the encryption and the hash that it was using? And it didn't seem like anyone got those two. Actually, I'm going to kind of skirt around this answer a little bit because we don't like to talk about specific challenges.
Line and I'll totally yell at you.
Yes, because Kate's on the line also, and she would totally yell at me. But we don't like to answer direct questions because a similar challenge might come up in the future, and if we give people an unfair advantage if they were listening to this podcast and the other person wasn't. So rather than that, I'm going to redirect this question.
You can find those answers is the Cyber Skyline Slack. We have a no spoilers methodologies only channel where you are allowed to talk specifically about challenges when the games are not open. So join the Slack and take advantage of that. It is the best way to get the answers to those questions.
Perfect. And so to more indirectly answer the question, I'd like to redirect it a little bit to using open source intelligence scraping tools, like web scraping tools, things that can kind of, we talked about those movies, where you had to go through and, look for a specific movie or something like that. Have either Hush or Mr. Spinham, have you either one of you ever had to use a web scraping tool, or do you do it by hand where you just kind of go through the list individually?
Typically what I do is if you're referring to when you have to like make a word list or find things in a specific page, rather than scraping, I'll copy the whole page, pull it down, and isolate the data so that I strip all the extra stuff out of it, because it makes it a lot easier to read when you don't have all the markup items in it and hashes and slashes. And so the best way that I do it is, because I've done it a couple different ways. I've also used wget to get it and stripped it out that way to get the data that I need. But I've just found it easiest to right click and copy and paste it over into a notepad. And then I like Cyber Chef. I'm a huge Cyber Chef fan. and I will regex all day long on CyberChef because it's easier, and it'll show me if at the bottom while I'm doing it, if I have it on auto bake, it'll automatically show me what I'm stripping out of it. So that's the way I like to do that on the scraping.
Great. And Mr. Venom, did you have something to add to that?
I'm a strong fan of just using wget and then using GitHub's text editor Atom so that I can select multiple lines at once and actually delete the extra spaces, white space, whatever it may be. And I'm lazy at web scraping. I have a wonderful person who knows Python on my team who's built some very evil custom web scrapers for me. I am working on getting better at that, but in the meantime, I function with wget and Atom.
Me, myself, I'm a big Cool and Crunch fan, so those are my go-to tools for that. Mr. Smith, we have a question that was asked specifically for you from Kenneth Atchison. Which platform has the best tools, Windows, Mac, or Linux for OSINT?
So if you go built-in, every one of those has a web browser. You can pick whichever browser you'd like. Please, please, please stay away from Internet Explorer or Microsoft Edge. But other than that, I'd say you're pretty safe to get whatever you need to for OSINT. Kali, of course, comes pre-baked with some basic OSINT tools for reconnaissance and information gathering. But I personally run most of my life based on Mac OS. I like the fact that, well, they are a big corporation. They do have some nice baked-in privacy features. So that's essentially where I live my life.
Awesome. Okay, so we are moving into the last part of our show here. So this is definitely...
I just want to add one thing on the OS thing. It's not so much about the OS you have if you don't know how to use it. So, real talk, Sam. It's not about the OS. It's about your skills. Because when I first started out, someone made me install Kali, and I couldn't even navigate to a web browser because I didn't know that it wasn't like Firefox. I couldn't find the...
looks like she dropped off in the middle.
With your operating system. With that, I'm going to hop off the line, guys. I have a small issue with my car, and I need to pull over.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so, a really good point there. And I did want to mention that there are certain operating systems that are specifically built for open source intelligence. One of them is called Buscador. I don't know if anyone here has ever used Buscador, but it's kind of like you can actually put it in a virtual machine or on a boot, USB, and load up this operating system that comes pre-built with tons of open source intelligence tools. So I would definitely take a look at Buscador. And then let's see, there was another one I mentioned, Kali, of course, and the other one I was thinking of was called Dora. So there's Dora OSINT. That's another operating system that's kind of built specifically for open source intelligence. All right. So in the last couple of minutes that we have left, looks like we have a question coming in from Eric. That'd be a good one to kind of wrap this up. He asked, can you explain what the NCL gym is? I'm new to the cyber world, and I'm curious how that works. Is it like a virtual machine or a cloud-based service? And we'll just kind of open that up. We'll start this time with you, Mr. Svenim.
Sure. So the NCL gym is a cloud-based service that I can't speak to the full architecture. Maybe Toby would want to chime in and chat, but it may have some virtual machines running behind it. It depends on what part of the gym you're looking at. And the gym is essentially a place for you to train, get some write-ups on how you would normally go about solving that type of challenge, and to start honing your skills and learning about the different types of things that will be occurring during the individual game, the preseason game, and the team game.
Great. And then we have a follow-up question also, which is, I'll go ahead and direct to you, Hush, which is, yes, a question about the NCL gym. Can students use the gym as a group? That is, can the students do group learning in the gym?
As in, Okay, the gym's purpose is to prepare you for the actual competition itself. And during the NCL games, you're not supposed to share accounts. I mean, that's like a big no-no. You don't do it, you'll get banned and all that other good stuff. And all of us like stickers. Why would you screw yourself out of a sticker? But the gym, you shouldn't need a group. It's if you get stuck on something, that's a place that you're going to be able to work through the problems, the challenges, without being penalized. If you have to click on reveal the answer, it gives you a guide on how to accomplish that challenge. You can refer back to it at any point in time. The gym is your personal gym. Sure that other people in your school that you're attending or whatever group that you're in, they have their own access to their gym, and you can't discuss the challenges with each other during the individual. That is what is the most important. And then when it comes to team, you can't discuss outside of your team, not even with other team members at your own school. If they're not in your team, you don't do it. Individual, you don't do it. Preseason, you can talk about whatever you want. But your gym is your gym. Other people don't log into your account. That would be like saying, hey, I need my buddy to log into my work account for me on my behalf. So what happens? They get in there and do some things that aren't so on the up and up and get you in trouble. You wouldn't do it at work. Don't do it in this. Treat it like if you're at a job, only it's fun.
Okay, so let's see. Yeah, just to add a little bit to that. So you mentioned a really good point, which is you can't share accounts. You know, if you purchase the NCL, that's for your use, right? Now, assuming that we're not using group accounts, you could of course you work as a team to solve something in the gym if you wanted to. But again, you know, noting that that and that might be really useful to establish like your Discord channels if you're using that, or if you're using like Google Docs, or just kind of coordination. It's a big part of teaming. And so I think you could find some value in doing team challenges through the gym. But again, we don't share accounts. When you purchase an account, that's for your use. So okay, and then we have one more question, which is, how do you become an ambassador? Coming from Christopher. And yeah, I really wish Crypto was on for this, and she would definitely love to answer that for you directly. But generally speaking, you can just go directly to cryptocate.com, and under ambassadors, there actually is just an application, and you can fill that application out. It has some specific questions about what you're looking for out of the ambassador program, and what kind of time commitments you have available, and what your strengths and weaknesses are. So, we want to make sure that it's a good fit. I would mention that if you are applying as an ambassador, that if you have a preference of team, whether you want to work, with one of the, Team Bits or Team Frogs, or, the Guppies here, Team Mako, that you specify that, it'd be really useful to kind of get through, the interview process if we have an idea of, where you think you're going to fit best. Okay, so that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and finish the show out. We'll give Hush a couple of seconds to talk about what are you working on?
Well, I'm working on a lot of things. I'm currently helping out with the Diana Initiative and trying to get through my master's degree. That's about it. Getting ready to go to WESIS. Okay.
And Mrs. Venom, what do you got on the plate?
I'm currently working on my job because I have no personal life, and I am patiently waiting for a coworker to return. I have a Nerf gun at the ready.
Nice. I'm still working on my master's. I've got one class left after the one I'm in right now, and then I'll be able to walk in May. So I'm really excited about finishing my master's degree. I got several blogs coming out this month on cryptocate.com, and I'll be starting up into a couple of the games that are around. I'm really looking forward to going up to VMI and going to the Cyber Cup there. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then I'll also be over at WESIS. So we will be at any of those events. Feel free to come up and talk to us. We're pretty friendly. If anyone else has any questions, then just leave them in the comments. I will of course, archive the show. But if you have any questions, you can still post in there. And if we can always go back and answer those, or feel free to queue them up for next week. So I'll go ahead and say that we're done for this week, unless Hush or Mr. Spin, you got anything to add? Nope. Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and say thank you to all of the people that tuned in to the show. Definitely appreciate you, and looking forward to starting the games here very, very soon. So, yeah, that should do it. I got to figure out how to. There we go. Okay. Thank you again for everything.
Bye, everybody.